crystal centerpiece shattered against the marble floor of Seoul's Grand Hanwha Hotel. 300 guests turned. Mocking laughter rippled through the international charity gala like poison. Ama Mensah stood frozen among the glittering shards, her trembling hands still reaching for the arrangement she had spent 14 hours creating. The socialite who had shoved her smiled victoriously. Staff members lowered their heads. No one stepped forward. Then silence fell. Kang Song-hyun, the most feared billionaire in South Korea, walked slowly across the ballroom. His black tailored suit absorbed the chandelier light. The ink of his family tattoo curved beneath his collar. Without speaking, he bent down, took her hand, helped her rise, faced the stunned guests, and said calmly, "My wife deserves your respect." The laughter died instantly. Everyone froze. Please like, share, and subscribe. 3 months earlier, the delivery entrance of the Grand Hanwha Hotel smelled of exhaust fumes and wilting roses. Ama Mensah balanced 3 boxes of imported orchids against her hip while scanning her vendor badge at the service door. The security guard barely glanced at her. She had learned that invisibility was both her shield and her cage in Seoul. "Hurry up!" her supervisor barked through the radio. The chairman's suite needs fresh arrangements before his morning meeting. Ama adjusted the boxes and walked faster. Inside the freight elevator, she caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. Brown skin glowing against her simple cream blouse. Natural hair pulled back in a low bun. Soft eyes that carried more stories than she ever shared. 25, Ama Mensah had lived through enough disappointment to recognize that beauty existed in quiet moments rather than grand gestures. She had learned this truth in Accra. She was still learning it in Seoul. The 47th floor. Ama arranged white lilies and pale green eucalyptus in the chairman's private conference room. She worked silently, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who understood that flowers spoke languages words could not reach. She did not know she was being watched. Behind the one-way glass, Kang Song-hyun stood in his adjacent office, his cold eyes fixed on the woman arranging flowers in his conference room. His sharp jawline caught the morning light. The symbolic family tattoo, an intricate design of intertwining cranes and mountain peaks, curved along his inner wrist beneath his Patek Philippe watch. His assistant, Director Park, stood 3 steps behind him. "The international gala preparations are on schedule, Chairman." Song-hyun did not respond. His gaze remained on the woman's hands, on the way she touched each stem as if it mattered, as if every petal deserved gentleness. Later that afternoon, Ama walked through Myeongdong toward her evening architecture class. The scholarship that had brought her to Korea 2 years ago had been withdrawn after a corruption scandal destroyed the foundation's funding. She had considered returning to Ghana. Her mother had begged her to come home, but Ama had promised herself she would finish what she started. So she took 3 jobs: floral design during the day, cafe shifts on weekends, and every evening she sat in the back row of Seoul National University's continuing education program, studying the building she dreamed of one day creating. Inside the classroom, Professor Yoon wrote structural calculations on the whiteboard. Ama's notebook was already filled with sketches, elegant spaces that blended Korean minimalism with the warm textures of West African architecture. Courtyards that breathed, windows that welcomed, homes that felt like belonging. She did not notice the man in the expensive coat standing outside the classroom window. Kang Song-hyun had followed her. He did not yet understand why. 1 week later, the Grand Hanwha Hotel's event planning office buzzed with tension. The International Charity Gala, hosted annually by the Kang Family Foundation, was the most prestigious event in Seoul's social calendar. Every detail had to be flawless. Ama had been assigned to lead the floral design team for the first time. Her supervisor, Ms. Cho, handed her the budget specifications without making eye contact. "Don't embarrass us," Ms. Cho said flatly. The chairman personally reviews every arrangement. That evening, Amma stayed late in the hotel's basement workshop, surrounded by imported roses, peonies, and branches of forsythia. She sketched her centerpiece design, a cascading arrangement that evoked both Korean elegance and the golden warmth of an African sunset. She did not know that this design would change her life. Meanwhile, on the executive floor, Kang Sung-hyun reviewed intelligence reports from his private security division. Someone within his corporation was leaking confidential merger information to a rival conglomerate. The betrayal pointed toward his own board of directors. He turned a page, paused. His eyes fell on an old photograph tucked into his personal files. A funeral. White flowers surrounding a portrait of his younger sister. She had died 3 years ago. An anonymous florist had created a memorial arrangement that arrived at the family estate without a card. Sung-hyun had never discovered who sent it, but he had never forgotten how those flowers had made him feel seen in his grief, for the first time in his life. The following morning, Amma presented her centerpiece design to the planning committee. The room fell silent. Ms. Cho frowned. "This is unconventional." Director Park studied the sketch. "It's actually quite striking. Chairman Kang values originality." Amma kept her expression calm, but her heart raced. She had poured everything into this design. If they rejected it, she would lose the bonus she needed for next semester's tuition. 2 hours later, Director Park returned with the verdict. "The chairman approved your design personally." Amma exhaled. She did not know that Kang Sung-hyun had recognized something in her sketches, a language he had encountered only once before, in the memorial flowers that had honored his sister. The night of the charity gala, Amma wore her only formal outfit, a simple navy dress that her mother had sewn for her university graduation in Accra. She was supposed to remain invisible, coordinate the floral installations, supervise the backup arrangements, disappear before the guests arrived. But nothing went according to plan. Across the ballroom, Kang Sung-hyun entered through the private elevator. His tailored black suit fit like armor. The family tattoo curved along his collarbone, partially visible beneath his slightly unbuttoned shirt. Guests parted instinctively. Conversations hushed. He moved through the crowd without greeting anyone. His cold eyes scanned the room until they found her, the woman arranging the final centerpiece near the orchestra stage. Near the service entrance, Amma adjusted a fallen orchid stem. She did not notice the woman approaching from behind. Han Soo-yeon, heiress to Korea's largest cosmetics empire, had been watching the quiet African florist all evening. She had also been watching Kang Sung-hyun, and she had noticed where his gaze kept drifting. Moments later, "You're in my way," Soo-yeon said, her voice dripping with condescension. Amma stepped aside politely. "I apologize. I'll move the arrangement." "No." Soo-yeon smiled coldly. "I think you should move yourself." She shoved Amma hard. Crystal centerpiece slipped. Shattered. 300 guests turned, and the laughter began. The aftermath. Amma's hands trembled as she knelt among the broken crystal. Her carefully designed arrangement, hours of work, lay destroyed at her feet. Staff members avoided her eyes. Guests whispered. Someone laughed again. Then the room fell silent. Kang Sung-hyun walked forward. His footsteps echoed against the marble. Crowd parted. He stopped directly in front of Amma. For a moment, he simply looked at her. Then he bent down, offered his hand. And when she took it, when her warm fingers touched his cold palm, something shifted in his expression. Something no one had ever seen before. He helped her rise, turned to face the stunned guests, and spoke. "My wife deserves your respect." The silence that followed was absolute. 1 hour later, Alma sat in Kang Songhyun's private suite on the penthouse floor. Her hands still trembled. She had not spoken since he led her away from the ballroom. He stood by the window, his back to her, the city lights of Seoul glittering below. "Why?" she finally asked. Her voice was soft but steady. "Why did you say that?" He turned. His cold eyes met hers. "Because they would have destroyed you." Truth emerged slowly. Songhyun explained that the woman who had shoved her, Han Soo-yeon, was connected to the rivals attempting to sabotage his corporation. By publicly claiming Alma as his wife, he had placed her under his protection. No one would dare touch her now. "But I'm not your wife," Alma said quietly. "I'm no one." He studied her for a long moment. "You are not no one." The proposition, "I need a wife," he said flatly. "For 6 months. To stabilize my public image while I investigate the corruption within my board." Alma stared at him. "You want me to pretend?" "I want you to survive." He paused. "In exchange, I will fund the remainder of your education. Architecture. Any university you choose." Her breath caught. "Why me?" He turned back toward the window. "Because you are the only person in that ballroom who did not bow to their cruelty." Later that night, Alma returned to her small apartment in a working-class neighborhood outside Gangnam. She sat on her bed, staring at the business card he had given her. Kang Songhyun, Chairman, Kang Holdings International. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Tzurisk Alma, strength is not refusing help. Strength is knowing when to accept it. Tzurisk." She picked up her phone, dialed the number. "I'll do it," she said quietly. 6 months. On the other end, Songhyun closed his eyes. He did not yet understand why her voice made him feel something he had spent decades suppressing. The following week, Alma moved into the guest wing of Kang Songhyun's private estate in Pyeongchang-dong. The house was immaculate. Traditional Korean architecture blended with modern minimalism. Stone courtyards, paper screens, silence that felt both peaceful and isolating. She was given a private room overlooking a bamboo garden. A stylist arrived with an entirely new wardrobe. A protocol advisor taught her how to navigate Seoul's elite social circles. She learned quickly, but she never stopped feeling like an imposter. Meanwhile, Songhyun watched her adaptation from a careful distance. He observed how she thanked the household staff by name, how she learned basic Korean honorifics within days, how she spent her evenings sketching architectural designs in the garden pavilion rather than enjoying the luxuries he had provided. She was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. One evening, he found her on the rooftop terrace, staring at the city lights. "You're not sleeping," he observed. She turned. "Neither are you." He moved to stand beside her. For a moment, they were simply two people sharing the silence. "Tell me about Ghana," he said unexpectedly. Alma hesitated. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." She smiled softly, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. And she began to speak. That night stretched into hours. She told him about Accra, the red dust roads, the ocean at Labadi Beach, her mother's laughter, her father's funeral when she was 16, the scholarship that had promised a future, the corruption that had stolen it. He listened without interrupting. When she finally stopped speaking, dawn was breaking over Seoul. He said nothing. But when she returned to her room, she found a single white lily on her pillow. No note. None was needed. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Seoul's elite had accepted the sudden marriage announcement with cautious fascination. Gossip columns speculated endlessly. Who was this mysterious African woman? Where had she come from? How had she captured the attention of Korea's most untouchable billionaire? Amma attended charity luncheons and corporate dinners on Songhyun's arm. She learned to smile through condescension, to respond to veiled insults with quiet grace, to carry herself like someone who belonged, even when every glance reminded her that she didn't. One afternoon, Han Seon cornered Amma in the powder room of a luxury department store. "I know this marriage is fake," Soo-yeon hissed. "I don't know what game you're playing, but it won't last." Amma met her gaze calmly. "Then you have nothing to worry about." She walked away before Soo-yeon could respond, but her hands trembled the entire drive home. That evening, Songhyun noticed immediately. "What happened?" Amma shook her head. "Nothing important." He studied her. "You're lying." She looked up at him, this cold, powerful man who had somehow become the only person in Seoul who saw her clearly. "Han Seon knows," she admitted quietly. "About the arrangement." His expression hardened. "She knows nothing." "She suspects." He paused. "There is a difference. What happens when suspicion becomes certainty?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the intricate details of his family tattoo curving beneath his rolled sleeve. "Then I will make certain she regrets it." Later that night, Amma couldn't sleep. She wandered into the estate's private greenhouse, a space she had discovered during her second week. Rows of exotic flowers bloomed under soft artificial light. She didn't expect to find him there. Songhyun stood among the orchids. His suit jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled. He held a pair of pruning shears with surprising familiarity. "My sister loved this greenhouse," he said without turning. "She spent hours here before she died." Amma's heart clenched. She had read about his sister's death in the newspaper archives. Car accident. No other details released. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He turned to look at her. For the first time, she saw grief behind his cold eyes. "Someone sent flowers to her memorial," he said quietly. "Anonymous. I never found out who." He paused. But those flowers were the only thing that felt honest during the entire funeral. Amma's breath stopped. She remembered. 3 years ago, she had taken a commission from a grieving client, someone who wanted to honor a young woman's memory without revealing their identity. She had created an arrangement of white roses and eucalyptus. Simple. Honest. Full of unspoken love. She had never known the recipient. Until now. She said nothing. Truth lodged in her throat like a stone. How could she explain that fate had connected them long before this arrangement? How could she tell him that she had already touched his heart once, without ever knowing his name? She kept silent. But the weight of the secret changed something inside her. 1 month into the arrangement, Kang Songhyun's investigation into the corporate leak intensified. Director Park delivered encrypted reports each morning. The evidence pointed toward Vice Chairman Hwang, a man who had served on the Kang Holdings board for over 2 decades. Betrayal from within the family's inner circle. Songhyun showed no visible reaction, but his private security detail doubled, and he began ensuring that Amma was never without protection. Meanwhile, Amma received an unexpected letter at the estate. A full scholarship offer. Seoul National University's graduate program in architecture. All tuition covered. All expenses funded. No sponsor name listed. She stared at the letter for hours. When she confronted Songhyun that evening, he did not deny it. "You deserved this 2 years ago," he said simply. "The corruption that took it from you has been corrected. You can't just fix my life without asking me." He met her gaze. "Would you have accepted if I asked?" She had no answer. That night, they argued for the first time. She accused him of controlling her future. He accused her of refusing help out of pride. Their voices rose, then fell. Finally, she sank onto the garden bench, exhausted. "I don't want to owe you everything," she whispered. "I want to earn something myself." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You have already earned more than you know." She looked at him. In the moonlight, his sharp features softened. She realized with sudden clarity that she no longer saw him as the cold billionaire who had rescued her. She saw him as a man carrying burdens no one else could understand. The following morning, Amma accepted the scholarship. But she made one condition. She would repay everyone, not in money but in service to communities who needed architectural hope. Songhyun agreed. Something in his expression shifted when she outlined her plan. Respect. And something deeper. 6 weeks into the arrangement, the annual Kong Holdings shareholder meeting approached. Vice Chairman Huang had been quietly building alliances against Songhyun. Whispered accusations spread through the corporate corridors. The chairman has become distracted by his foreign wife. His judgment is compromised. Company needs new leadership. Songhyun knew. He had always known. But now he had the evidence to strike back. The day of the meeting, Amma attended as his wife. She wore a deep burgundy hanbok-inspired gown that blended Korean elegance with African textile patterns. The Kong family matriarch, Songhyun's grandmother, watched her with cold, evaluating eyes. The old woman had not spoken to Amma since the marriage announcement. Her silence was a verdict of its own. Inside the boardroom, Vice Chairman Huang made his move. He called for a vote of no confidence, accused Songhyun of abandoning the company's traditions, demanded his removal as chairman. Tension was suffocating. Songhyun sat motionless. Then he smiled. It was the most dangerous expression Amma had ever seen. Counterattack was devastating. Songhyun's private intelligence division had gathered evidence of Huang's embezzlement and corporate espionage. Documents appeared on every board member's tablet. Bank records, encrypted communications, proof of betrayal. The vote collapsed. Huang was escorted out by security. As he passed Amma's seat, he hissed, "This isn't over." She held his gaze without flinching. When she looked back at Songhyun, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Pride. That evening, the estate was quiet. Amma found Songhyun in the greenhouse again. He stood among the white lilies, his tattoo visible beneath his rolled sleeves. "You didn't tell me it would be that dangerous," she said. "You didn't ask." She stepped closer. "I'm asking now." He turned to face her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he reached out. His fingertips brushed a strand of hair from her face. Touch was featherlight, but it shattered something between them. "The danger isn't over," he said quietly. "Huang has allies. Han Suyun is one of them." "Then let me help." He studied her. "Why?" She met his gaze. "Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just an arrangement." 8 weeks into the arrangement, Amma received a cryptic message. An anonymous source requested a meeting at a cafe in Insadong. Against Songhyun's advice, she went alone. The source was a former employee of the foundation that had originally funded her scholarship. He handed her documents, proof that her scholarship had been deliberately sabotaged, not by general corruption, by a specific directive from Han Suyun's family. Connection became clear. 2 years ago, Han Suyun's cosmetics empire had attempted a hostile takeover of Kong Holdings. The attempt failed. Songhyun's countermeasures had cost the Han family billions. In retaliation, they had systematically destroyed opportunities for anyone connected to Songhyun, including scholarship recipients funded by the Kong Family Foundation. Amma had been collateral damage in a war she never knew existed. That night, she confronted Songhyun in his study. You knew, she said, her voice trembling. You knew what they did to me. He didn't deny it. I discovered it recently. After the gala. Why didn't you tell me? He stood and walked toward her. Because knowing would have changed your reason for being here. She shook her head. My reason? He stopped directly in front of her. Close enough that she could see the storm behind his controlled expression. I needed you to choose this. Not out of revenge. Not out of obligation. He paused. I needed to know that when you stayed for yourself. Tears burned her eyes. And what about you? Why did you choose me? He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk drawer. Pulled out an old photograph. His sister's funeral. And in the background, almost invisible, an arrangement of white roses and eucalyptus. Her arrangement. I have been looking for you for 3 years, he said quietly. The woman who understood grief without needing to name it. The revelation broke something open. Amma told him the truth. The anonymous commission. The memorial flowers. Coincidence that was never a coincidence at all. When she finished, neither of them spoke. Then Songhyun did something he had not done in years. He pulled her into his arms and held her as if she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. 3 months into the arrangement, Seoul's first snowfall arrived on a silent December evening. The estate grounds transformed into a landscape of white. Amma stood on the rooftop terrace, watching the flakes drift down like quiet promises. She didn't hear Songhyun approach, but she felt him. His presence had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. He stood beside her, his dark coat dusted with snow, his tattoo visible against his collar, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. My grandmother wants to meet you, he said. Formally. Amma's stomach tightened. She's been watching me for weeks. She watches everyone. He paused. But she asked about you specifically. That has never happened before. The following afternoon, Amma was escorted to the family matriarch's private chambers. The old woman sat in a traditional hanbok, her silver hair pinned beneath an ornate binyeo. Her eyes were sharp, evaluating, unforgiving. Sit, she commanded. Amma obeyed. The interrogation was relentless. Questions about her family, her education, her intentions. Amma answered honestly, without embellishment or defense. When the matriarch asked why she had agreed to the arrangement, Amma said simply, Because your grandson offered me a chance to survive, and because I believed he deserved someone who would not lie to him. The old woman studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was the first warmth Amma had seen from any member of the Kong family. My grandson has always been too cold, the matriarch said. But cold men often burn the brightest when they finally find warmth. She dismissed Amma with a wave. But as Amma reached the door, the old woman added, You have my approval. For now. That evening, Songhyun found Amma in the greenhouse. My grandmother rarely approves of anyone, he said. She approves of me for now. He almost smiled. That is the highest compliment she has ever given. Amma looked at him. In the soft light, his sharp features seemed less severe, more human. Songhyun. He stepped closer. Yes. What happens when the 6 months end? He reached out. His fingers brushed her cheek. I have not thought about ending since the night you accepted. She leaned into his touch. The snow fell silently outside. And in that frozen moment, both of them understood that pretending had become impossible. 5 months into the arrangement, Han Seon made her final move. She released fabricated documents to Seoul's most influential media outlets, accusations that Kang Songhyun had paid for a foreign bride to legitimize a tax evasion scheme. The scandal erupted overnight. Stock prices plummeted. Board members demanded answers. Carefully constructed facade threatened to collapse. Amma offered to leave. "If I disappear, the story dies," she told Songhyun in his study. "Your reputation." "My reputation means nothing." She shook her head. "Your family's legacy is not worth more than you." She stared at him. He had never spoken to her like this. Raw. Unguarded. "I will not let you sacrifice yourself for a lie," she whispered. Crossed the room in 3 steps. Took her hands in his. "Then let us make it the truth." Press conference was historic. Kang Songhyun stood before 200 journalists in the Grand Hanwha Hotel's main ballroom. Amma stood beside him. Not behind. Beside. He spoke calmly, his family tattoo visible beneath his open collar. He acknowledged that their marriage began as an arrangement. He admitted his initial motives were strategic. Then he said, "But love does not follow strategy. Love follows truth. And the truth is that this woman, Amma Mensa, has become the only future I want." He turned to face her. Took her hands. "This is not a performance. This is my heart. And I am asking you in front of the entire world if you will stay." Amma's eyes filled with tears. She had spent her entire life learning to survive alone. But standing here, holding his hands, she finally understood that strength was not refusing connection. Strength was having the courage to accept it. "Yes," she whispered. Cameras flashed like lightning. 6 months after the gala, the wedding was held at the Kang family estate. The ceremony blended Korean elegance with Ghanaian tradition. White orchids cascaded from bamboo archways. Kent cloth ribbons adorned every table. Korean drummers performed alongside a live traditional Ghanaian highlife band. Guests from 4 continents witnessed the union. Amma wore a custom gown. White silk embroidered with golden adinkra symbols. A delicate Korean bridal veil. Her mother's pearl earrings. When she walked down the aisle, every guest rose. Not because protocol demanded it, because her presence commanded respect. Songhyun waited at the altar. His black hanbok was tailored to perfection. His family tattoo visible along his wrist as he reached for her hands. When she finally stood before him, he leaned close and whispered, "I have waited my entire life for you." The vows were simple. He promised to protect her, not by shielding her from the world but by standing beside her while she faced it. She promised to love him, not despite his coldness but because she understood the warmth it protected. When they kissed, the entire estate erupted in applause. Korean and Ghanaian traditions merged in joyful celebration. Later that evening, the reception continued beneath paper lanterns and a sky full of stars. Amma's mother had flown in from Accra. She held her daughter's face and whispered, "Your father would be so proud." Amma wept. But for the first time in years, her tears were not from sorrow. At midnight, Songhyun led Amma to the rooftop terrace where they had shared their first honest conversation. The city glittered below. Snow began to fall again. "I never believed love could exist alongside power," he said quietly. She leaned against him. "And now?" He looked down at her, his cold eyes finally warm. "Now I believe love is the only power that matters." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, gently, reverently, as if she was sacred. Fade to black. The Grand Hanwha Hotel International Architecture Summit. Amma Mensakong stood at the podium presenting her graduate thesis. Asterisk Designing Hope, Sustainable Architecture for Underserved Communities. Asterisk. Her research outlined affordable housing solutions that blended Korean minimalism with African communal design principles. 3 international foundations pledged funding before she finished speaking. From the back of the auditorium, Kang Songhyun watched his wife command the room. His family tattoo was visible beneath his rolled sleeves. His expression was unreadable to anyone else. But Alma could see his pride from across the hall. Through the presentation, journalists surrounded them. One asked the question everyone wanted to know. Chairman Kang, how would you describe your decision to marry Alma Mensa? Songhyun looked at his wife, then at the cameras, and said calmly, "The greatest decision I ever made was choosing the woman everyone else overlooked." Outside the hotel, Seoul glittered beneath the winter sky. Alma slipped her hand into his. "What happens now?" she asked softly. He looked down at her, his quiet wife who had taught him that love was not weakness. "Now," he said, "we build something that lasts." She smiled. And together they walked into their future. If you loved this story, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment telling me your favorite moment. More stories are coming soon.